Something you rarely see these days in the MTV-generated music industry mainstream. Hip-hop with a message of raw truth. Felipe Coronel, better known as Immortal Technique, is a Peruvian-born, Harlem-raised hip-hop artist and political activist. A self-described social guerrilla, Tech's views about politics, religion, classism, and racism are expressed poetically and powerfully through his lyrics. And some of his albums pack more historical relevance than an entire school history book. To maintain control over his work, Tech is never signed with a label, which gives him ultimate freedom of expression. He's a vocal supporter of many political movements and struggles for justice. Since the Occupy Wall Street movement started last year, he's been an active voice of support for the cause. And now a new documentary coming out July 10th gives us an intimate look at his life, music, and activism. Here's a sneak peek.
You symbolize the voice of truth all around the world in the name of rap music and hip-hop.
If I was somewhere else simply because of the music I made, then there was nowhere it couldn't take me.
Can I have a platform where I can still do new, tell my truth, and make some money so I can take care of my life? There's a reason that picks this pen up.
Immortal Technique is one of the most dangerous artists in America.
To join me now in studio to discuss more about his beliefs and his work is Immortal Technique himself. Thanks for coming in studio.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Why do you think that politically conscious hip-hop is not more in the mainstream today?
The reality of this is that it wasn't always that way. That in the during the birth of hip-hop and then subsequently about a decade afterwards, there was always a presence of that griot voice, that voice of truth, whether it was Public Enemy and others, X-Clan, individuals who brought these taboo subjects, these things that were supposed to be resolved by civil rights struggles, which were never resolved, things like racism and classism, unspoken truths, the black eye of America, things that I felt were necessary to describe, especially in an age where we're at war with an idea of terrorism, rather than the causes of such a thing. So I think that for me, it was important to maintain as much control over my art form as possible, which is why I chose to be independent and become the label myself, as opposed to signing with a large corporation that would then have a process of approval over the work that I do. And honestly, you know, would probably make a lot less money per unit. And that's always good to have more economic control as well. I think someone said it best, you can't have political sovereignty without having economic sovereignty.
Indeed. What do you think changed in the industry, though? I mean, you're saying, you know, we had Wu-Tang and all these people that you're talking about now, and it just seems like now it's so manufactured. Mm-hmm. Do you think that it's an element or a mechanism of control to keep kids kind of out of touch with these subjects?
You know, I'm not responsible for that far-reaching conspiracy theory, but I think that there are a group of people who feel that the corporate system specifically targeted that sort of message and said, no, we want to turn this into an entertainment form. You know, and in entertainment, you know, if you don't like the idea that they did that with that, then you're not going to like what they do with TV either. The way they tell people, oh, you know what? No, honey, you're too fat. You're going to have to go throw up somewhere in order to be on television. Or, you know what, bro, you know, we want to put this on you, or, you know, you're going to play this sort of character. Everything, you know, it's turned into almost a caricature of itself. Not that everything is like that. Just saying that in the majority of mainstream things that you'll find, it's kind of built around that. They found a cookie cutter, the same way Hollywood did. You know, Hollywood got tired of doing original stuff, so they said, hey, let's just remake all this stuff from the 80s, and then we're going to rape a bunch of cartoon series and make this come to life, and, you know, the kid and everyone who's 30 or 40 will go see it now. Now, mind you, they do this in a very, very creative way sometimes, and sometimes it's a flop. So it's just hit and miss. And I think that for me, the way that it was explained when I was a lot younger was that hip-hop always had these two characteristics. In the same way, you know, on a plantation, people sang songs not because they felt happy of being there, but because they imagined another life. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home, to take me to another life. And then there was a different slave that said, no, man, this plantation is, we're going to get out of here right now. So in hip-hop, not everybody wants to hear misery and chaos and destruction. Sure, we want to party, we want to dance, but there has to be a balance, because we cannot become a caricature of ourselves. People cannot be defined by one specific tiny thing that happens to be a piece of who they are. You know, and I think that marginalization was given free range by the industry rather than being curtailed and held to a higher standard.
And talking about just corporations wanting to maximize their profits, and that's really why we see a lot of the ills in this world. Let's talk a little bit about the upcoming Bilderberg Group coming up this weekend in Chantilly. When you think of groups like this, the Trilateral Commission, all of these New World Order elitist establishments, think tanks, let's say, do you think that there's a more sinister thing going on, that there's this nefarious group of people trying to control or dominate the globe? Or do you just look at it, like you just said, and just say, it's just a group of rich elitists trying to maximize company profits from all across the spectrum?
Well, I think that when you discuss it, you don't need to use these ideas of you know, that a fanatic would rely on to say, hey, you know, maybe they're planning some secret attack or something. No, but all corporations are a nation unto themselves. You know, they're defined as a human being, even though the majority of them, and practically all of them, are soulless. And I think that at some point, you know, when you approach that level of understanding, you can excuse it in that manner. You can say, oh yeah, this is just a business, this is just how they make money, but real people's lives are being affected. You know, there's almost seems to be a meticulous strategy to keep anything that is thought-provoking out of the mainstream. And, you know, that's a shame. And I think that there's a new generation of MCs that are coming up now, which make a different type of music. And I think that's good to hear. I think that we need that sort of diversity in hip hop to be a resurgence of the culture. Now, you know, is it a corporation that decides these things for human beings? You know, it doesn't need to be a secret society. McDonald's ain't gonna tell you the recipe for what they have. Or how they make the fry. These things are secret. We don't even know the ingredients that's in the food. America makes it incredibly difficult for people to understand the genetically modified things that they're consuming, and a lot of times, you know, it's been a struggle to even get them to label it that. So if they're so keen on keeping a secret the food that could potentially cause cancer in people, do you think that they would give an inkling of thought to what could potentially be dangerous about words that are said in music that people listen to? They don't care.
Yeah, I mean, what about the regulatory bodies that people rely on to pass these foods onto the public? I mean, why do you think that there is...
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Or the idea that, you know, that this country is led by moral leaders, by people who are distinctly above in terms of their decision-making capabilities than others. I mean, when you see them talk in Congress, you obviously can tell that a lot of these people are incredibly uncultured and uncouth. So when the finger is pointed at hip-hop for being the cause of these things in the youth, you know, always remember that when you point a finger, there are three fingers pointing back at you.
Art reflects life. I mean, let's talk about, you know, you talk about false flags a lot, and you talk about these perpetrated acts of terror by our own government onto the rest of the world and onto our society. Why do you think it is that people just don't question this conventional wisdom? Like you're saying, I mean, Americans are so, it seems like, blissfully unaware of these things.
I wouldn't say that,
on.
you know what, that's a common misconception to me, that America is somehow more ignorant than the rest of the world. I think that an interesting analogy could be made. Let's say there's a homeless person who's an alcoholic lying in the middle of the street. Who is his alcoholism really affecting besides himself, tearing his own life apart, you know? Now let's take a different person, a school bus driver taking your kids and my kids to school. Who does his alcoholism affect? A hell of a lot more people, a hell of a lot more lives. You know, if someone's going to be ignorant in some small town in the middle of Siberia or some, you know, rural village, pick a continent, you know, who is their ignorance truly affecting? But whose ignorance is truly affected when you have someone that invades the wrong country, you know, or decides that, you know, these are acceptable casualties or collateral damage, or there's no even conversation about who drones are really hitting. I think at that point, our ignorance is just more for the public's display than other people's. And since we're driving the world as a school bus driver, then our ignorance affects a lot more people's lives than anybody else's. But I don't think that Americans are naturally more ignorant. I think that they have a lot more things to pacify themselves with than other countries. And I think that plays into a little bit of the apathy that takes place when we talk about human rights and real tangible things that affect people in other places.
Sure, it's more mirrored back to us in our own culture. The conditioning of our media really is certainly more penetrated in our society than other countries. But I wanted to talk to you a little about the Occupy Wall Street movement. I know that you've been a vocal supporter of it. If you look back at history, though, I mean, There really hasn't ever been an organic uprising. We see in Vietnam, it was the draft that really was the catalyst for people to get out. And now our military is privatized, and I don't really see there being that catalyst or that driving force. What do you think that it's possible to have a peaceful, nonviolent revolution in the face of the biggest military in the world?
I think that there could be enough pressure put on a government by people in order to influence change. I think that the impossible is possible. You know, the United States fought Vietnam and lost. You know, Russia fought Afghanistan and lost. You know, if those things are possible, then why can't awakening people and making them not just believe everything I say or you or anybody else says, but rather asking them to question everything that they're told and critically think and make that be the one thing that's associated with Americans? That's the catalyst that we need in order to create the change that we want. To say, does this pass the litmus test where we can honestly say this is logical and this is reasonable and this is humane? Do we have a double standard forever? Is that how we're going to live? Claiming that we don't sponsor terrorism and we don't torture people? You know, for the rest of the world that examines what goes on, do you know what it looks like? It doesn't look like we're at war with radical Islam. It doesn't look like we're at war with communism. It looks like we're at war with people that say no to us.